Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, the title of my message is Losing Comes Before Gain. And so, today, my message is going to be coming out of the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, which is the story of Joseph, which is a very popular story. It's one of my favorite stories because it gives you so much insight into the man of God and how he works in a person's life to bring to pass his purpose, and also the process that he takes a person through. Because in the process that he took Joseph through, it should give us very much encouragement. Because it says in the scriptures that whatsoever things were written for our learning, so we can learn a lot through the story of Joseph. And also, in the story of Joseph, it starts off with Joseph being given a big dream from God. And see, the story of Joseph is not really about Joseph. It's really about the promise that he made about Abraham. We read about the story of Joseph, but its overall plan was the promise he made to Abraham that he would make his seed into a great nation. And see, Abraham was he was his great grandfather. And so Joseph was just a part of God's plan, just as we are. We are just a part of God's plan, even when he makes us a promise. And so it starts off in the beginning of the story of Joseph about him giving him a big dream, as I said before. And the big dream was given to him in two different scenarios. That means he gave it to him in two different ways, which is to confirm that he was going to bring it to pass. And so he was so excited about this dream, and he was so excited to tell his brothers and his father as well. But his brothers, they were not excited about his dream at all, because it said they hated Joseph before he even had the dream. And once he told them the dream, they hated him even more, because see, it was putting him in a position of power, and in the dream they bowed down to him. So they did not want to hear anything about them being beneath Joseph, because they already did not like him anyway. And I heard a lot of stories about that Joseph should not have told his dream. And I don't think that's true at all, because if he did not tell us his dream, we would not know the process in which God works in a person's life. Because Joseph's story gives us so much insight. And I'm not saying that we should tell people, just say people our dream. We should not tell everybody our dream. But in Joseph's case, he told the dream for a reason, so that we could see the hand of God. And so once he told his brothers the dream, they were so upset with him. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to get rid of him. But the older brother, Reuben, he encouraged them not to kill him. And so what they decided to do was sell him for 20 pieces of silver to the Israelites. So can you imagine your own blood, your own brothers? Because it was 12 of them. And it said I guess the only one that did not hate him was Benjamin. Benjamin was the youngest brother. But they sold him for 20 pieces of silver into slavery. They sold him into slavery. So I can't imagine what Joseph was going through, because Joseph was just a boy at that time. He was nothing but 17 years old. And Joseph had lived a good life previously to this, because his father was very well off. So he had lived a very good life. And so the fact that they did this, it was a part of God's plan. Even though it was a major loss. It was a major loss. Can you imagine being separated from your family at such a young age? But it was God's plan. Because see, we can look at our own life. when we are going through our process, a lot of times God, he begins to eliminate things from our life. You know, people begin to lose things. Sometimes loved ones, sometimes just people that's being separated from people and things as well. Because see, God has to separate us. When God has a purpose for your life, it is just the thing that he does. Because see, he has to teach you to depend on him totally and not people. Because a lot of times people are hindrances. Family members, friends. A lot of times when you have money, you tend to rely on yourself as well. So a lot of times God will take everything from you, because Joseph basically was stripped of everything that he was used to. But it had to be done, because God was teaching Joseph to know him for himself, because he had previously, I'm sure he had learned about God through his father. But in order for him to do big things for God, he had to know God's voice. He had to know God's voice, because if you are surrounded by people, you have to think about in your natural life. When you are surrounded by people, most of the time you're going to go to him. You're going to go to them instead of God. And God wanted his total. He wanted his total. I'm trying to say the right word. His total individual. He just needed his whole mind to be on him and not other people, because when he got ready to direct him to lead his people, he had to be able to get them directions clearly from God and not be confused by people's voices that were surrounding him. So it's a reason why you are alone. You know, a lot of times people be fighting against being alone, but this is what God requires, and it's actually good for you, because you want to know directly who God is, his voice, and not other people. And so Joseph, like I said, would one day lead his people. And so he would have to know how to lead the people and what to do. He would have to really know God. And his training took 13 years. It was a very long time that he went through this process. And see, a lot of times in our own life, when we go through the process and just say we look at somebody else and it seems like they already walking in their purpose, but we still look like we are nowhere. But you cannot compare yourself to another person, because sometimes it takes a long time, as in the story of Joseph. 13 years was a very long time, but it was worth it, because during this process, while it looked like he was losing, he was gaining a lot of things. He was gaining wisdom. He was gaining courage. He was gaining patience, endurance, strength. You know, he had to learn how to be strong in order to stand on his own by himself for such a long period of time. And it's also, as our process, we are going through things that are adding to our life as well. We are learning strength, endurance, patience, wisdom. And so our losing is not really losing at all. God just, a lot of times we have to lose things for a season, for a reason, because it came to a point where once they sold Joseph, because Joseph was sold actually twice. He was sold to the Israelites, and then he was sold to Potiphar. And once he got in Potiphar's house, God gave him favor. So God was with him. In the story, it says that God was with Joseph. So even though he was a slave, he also was operating in his gift. While he was a slave, it didn't make any kind of sense that they would put him over Potiphar put him over his whole house. They said over all of his things. They said he did not even know all the things that he had because Joseph was in charge of it. Now that makes no sense in the natural. But see, God did not look at Joseph as a slave. He looked at Joseph as a leader because that is what God was calling Joseph to do. And so Joseph was already operating in his gift. And once he was in Potiphar's house, after he had been there a certain length of time, it was time for him to move. And so Potiphar's wife found Joseph very attractive. And so she basically threw herself on him. And because he did not want her, she lied on him and told her husband that he tried to rape her. But this just led him into the next step, which was the jail. So once he was in jail, Joseph began to lead the prisoners as well. So every time God moved him, he still had that favor. And so eventually, Joseph was led out of the jail. The jail was right before his promise was about to come to pass. And so each step you can see God was working in his life to get him closer to the promise. Just amazing. And so when it appeared that Joseph was losing, Joseph was actually winning. He was winning each step of the way. And so with God, actually you cannot lose. It might appear that you're losing things for a season, but with God, you are not actually losing anything. And so I want to read in Genesis, the 39th chapter, the 1st through the 6th verse. And I read out of the King James Version for anyone that is new to this channel. And it says, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Israelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph. As I said, the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. Can you imagine? Joseph was prosperous, even though he did not have anything in his hand. But God said he was prosperous. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that God was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So even Potiphar knew that God was with Joseph. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. So he was only blessed because Joseph was here. Joseph was there. So God was making Joseph's life comfortable, even though Joseph was a slave. And the blessings of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. So he didn't even know what all he had, because Joseph was in charge of it. And Joseph was a goodly and well favored. And so Joseph was blessed, even in the midst of being a slave. So we have to know that we are blessed, even in the midst of the process. We are so very blessed. And so we have to know that God knows how to restore everything. Everything that we have lost, God knows how to restore it back to us and give us even more. Because what happened to Joseph in the story, as you read in the story of Joseph, Joseph was not only reunited with his brothers and his father. And just the fact that his father grieves over him so much, because see, Joseph was the favorite son, because he was the son of Jacob's old age. And so he grieved over his son. And just to see that God restored him as well, God gave Jacob 17 more years with his son. So he gave him 13 years and plus some to spend with his son. So he actually did not lose anything. He actually gained. So we have to be encouraged. And so we have to continue to trust God. Even though when we looking like we are losing, we have to be able to still trust God. That's why I say this story is very encouraging. Because the time will come when God will restore everything. There will be a time of restoration coming to your life. So you have to believe that, because many people have lost, as well as Joseph did in this story, went through major loss. But God is a restorer. And so I want to read one last scripture, which is in Joel, the 2nd chapter, the 21st through the 27th verse. Okay, I'm going to start at that 21st verse. And it says, "Fear not, O land. Be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things. Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring. For the tree heareth her fruit, beareth her fruit. The fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God. For he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain and the latter rain, in the first month. And the floor shall be full of wheat, and the fat shall overflow with wine and oil. And I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, that have dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be ashamed." See, you are not going to be ashamed. If you keep trusting God, God is not going to let you be ashamed. "And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel." He's in the midst of us as well. "And that I am the Lord your God, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed." So you be encouraged. Amen. Bye-bye for now. Have a blessed and prosperous day.